Hi guys! So, just like last week, I'm just gonna do this whole entire video in one take because there's a lot to cover, even more than last week. Can you imagine that? Yeah, so welcome back. Yeah, so this is a little bit of introduction. My name is Errol and I'm doing this series called New to Christ, and we're in the second installment, second part of this series. It's called Sin. So the order of the series goes creation, sin, blood of Jesus, clean, and heaven. So it's these five broad strokes that I guess I want to cover about Christianity. And why am I doing so is because I find that some people always have this like misconception that it's a very hard religion to dive into, to deep dive into, or very tough to understand because there's certain words that are like a bit weird. So I just want to like clarify and like bring it down to the bare bones essentials of what the Bible is talking about, of what Christianity is really all about. And yeah, if you're new to Christ, hence the title, then welcome. Hopefully I will be able to explain certain concepts the best way I could in a intellectual yet simple manner that is not too hard to understand, if that makes any sense. And yeah, I will always do a one take. This is my first take for this kind of videos. Usually I take 3 takes, but then because of how long our script is today and for the whole entire series, I decided to do it on my first take, so if I do make any mistakes, I'm sorry, I'm still human, so please forgive me. And yeah, so there's one more thing. I forgot what I wanted to say. Oh right, yes. So if there's any, how to say, things that I get wrong theologically, that means like things that I've interpreted wrongly from the Bible, or things that I've understood wrongly about this concept or that concept, feel free to clarify with me in the comment section down below. And I always leave links, down below in the description box of like further readings, I guess, if you want to expand your knowledge on these topics. And this particular topic, which for today is sin. I will also be linking the script that I'm reading right now, and whatever, and also the links to my blog, aoco.wordpress.com. So you guys can, if you're more visual learner, I guess, need to see the words kind of thing, then sure, you can head over there and you can read it if you want. It's quite a lengthy thing I wrote, so yeah, if you're interested in that. Okay, so shall we begin? So a little recap from last week. We talked about creation and how God designed the universe and fashioned it for good. Everything, from the trees to the seas and even sort of the inanimate things like day and night. Then everything should be fine, right? Because God fashioned everything for good. But when you look around the world today, everywhere, it's not. You don't find that it's good. So why is that so? Well, this week we'll be talking about this thing called sin, which was the inciting incident of this whole entire gospel story, this whole entire biblical story. So if we want to know what happened after creation and the things following that, we need to know this very important and serious term in Christianity, which is called sin. So what is sin? In the Bible, sin is defined as the thing that separates us from God. The eternal separation between the creator and the created. Short answer. I call it a short answer because there's so many ways to describe this question, what is sin? But I think this is the basic idea of what it is to a certain degree. But how did it come about? Well, we have to go back to the story that we have at hand. So in the last part, when we left off, when God finished creating the universe, His creation and Himself are living in perfect harmony, and that is what He wanted. A community between His creator and Himself. But from that point to now, where sin was introduced, a lot has happened, even though it may seem like just a chapter difference. Okay, to summarize, I'm just going to summarize the story that happened so far. God has given Adam, the first man, a responsibility to be in charge of the garden of creation, the place that he is in right now, which is in Genesis chapter 2 verse 15. We've gone through that last the last installment. We talked a little bit about, in the last part, that Adam, the first man, obviously became very lonely. I mean, if you are seeing creatures that don't really look like you every single day, and you long for a creature that sort of looks like you, that's what Adam felt, you know. I think I'm just trying to like picture what he was feeling at that time. So he only hangs out with the animals all day, and there isn't a creature that looks like him or sort of looks like him. I wrote that. So when he was asleep, God took a rib from Adam's body and made a woman for him. Genesis chapter 2 verse 21 to 23. Yes, I know, a little weird, but yeah, that was what happened, you know. Sounds strange. Yes, I know, a lot of things sound strange to me at first when I heard about these stories, but you know, there are certain things that, you know, we can argue whether it's a literal thing or it's a metaphorical thing, but at the end of the day, what are we taking away from this whole entire lesson or this story? That's the more important thing I would like to post. Yeah, okay. So this is one of the stories that I've been hearing for so many years. I'm just gonna like up the brightness of my computer because I can see in the monitor that I look really dark. Cause yeah, I'm sorry. Where was I? Yeah. So I've been hearing this story for so many years, and it does not seem that weird to me now. But it may seem weird to you as a person who is new to the faith or new to this story at large. But yeah, just know that this was what was recorded. So now, yeah, we have caught up to speed. We are in Genesis chapter 3, which is entitled The Fall. Quite aptly, actually. It's a chapter called The Fall. This is the chapter where the concept of sin is introduced. The Bible records that the serpent, a snake, whatever, which is the most craftiest of all animals, Genesis chapter 3 verse 1, tempted Eve, which is Adam's wife, the woman that God had made for Adam. He challenges the instructions that God gave both Adam and Eve, which is to not eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, Genesis chapter 3 verse 4. He claims that God does not want them to eat it because God will be scared of them, for they will be like God and knowing good and evil, Genesis chapter 3 verse 5. So guess what? She really ate it. And not just that, she ate it and gave it to her husband, Adam, to eat it too. So I'm going to pause here for a little while. Eve had just disobeyed a direct command from God, which was not to eat of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, Genesis chapter 3 verse 3. So what kind of fruit or tree is even that? I have no idea, but I surely want to visit it too. You know, I'm sure it looks cool. It's something that I've never seen before in my life, or anybody rather, except for Adam and Eve. But the point is, Eve disobeyed a direct command from God, and by offering it to Adam too, by extension, Adam also disobeyed a direct command from God, which was to not eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. This act of disobedience is the first ever time sin was committed, and also is the introduction to sin and what it really is. By definition, or anything, any act or deed, any thought, any action that is against God's command, and by extension against God. This is really my definition and understanding of what sin is, but I'm sure there's tons of people out there that can give you a more clear definition and explanation for what sin really is. So do your research, you know, find out more. But this is what I understand it to be, personally, after hearing this story and reading this story. Is anything that is in direct conflict with who God is. Anything that is in direct contrast to who God truly is and wants for us. So, as much as the Bible is this holy book, right, and that people read for spiritual nourishment, is also a book, a body of literary work. I think I said this in the last part also. Or it's also known as an art form. And that really is what makes this Bible so interesting. If you constantly approach the Bible not as this ancient spiritual book that for a certain group of people revere so much, Christians, you know, but rather a body of literary work that has been exquisitely translated and canonized into this seamless leather-bound book, then we can see the Bible in a whole different level, whole new level. So why did I go on this tangent? You know, of why the Bible is a work of literature, etc., etc. And when we are talking about sin, you know, The first question is, what is sin? And now we're talking about how Bible is not just a holy book. Well, we are only 3 chapters in to this 66 volume book, and we already have encountered our inciting incident. The fall, aptly enough, is also the chapter name. Sin is the only thing that separates us, humanity, from God. This is a very, very, very important trope or motif in the entirety of the Bible. There is a reason why it was introduced so early on in the Bible, because what follows are accounts of humanity straying further and further away from God, and effectively further and further away from God's commands or instructions for humanity to follow. So this is a very important topic, or this is a very important inciting incident, because it's what sets off the whole entire Bible and sets off humanity in a direction that God never intended for humans to follow. I think I can sum up the entirety of the whole Bible in just one word. I think the word is redemption. Redemption. The whole Bible, from the book of Genesis, which is the first book, to the book of Revelations, which is the last book, is all pointing to how God is trying to redeem humanity, to reconcile with humanity, to take humanity back to the way it was in the first 2 chapters of the Bible, of the book, as He intended it to be. The first two chapters was the original plan, was creation, was good. But when we hit chapter 3, when sin was introduced, everything just spiraled out of control. So that is the inciting incident of what sin is. So that's what sin is. So next question is, who is sin? Well, sin is not a human being or noun, unfortunately. So we cannot point a finger and say, behold, sin is here, you know. Although in Genesis chapter 4 verse 7, God did tell this guy called Cain, is another character in the Bible, also Adam and Eve's son, if you're wondering, that sin is crouching at the door. Metaphorically, of course. If not, it will be a little bit scary lah, in my opinion, when like a being is just crouching at your door. Yeah. But sin is something that is present in all of humanity, as we have seen by the fall. Because Adam and Eve chose to disobey God, they have doomed humanity for, I guess, eternity, because of sin. Because Adam and Eve directly disobeyed God, they introduced sin as a result. Their descendants, which is all of humanity if you're wondering, are with sin, inherently with sin. So sin is not a noun, but rather a concept, an idea. It's manifested in many, many ways in the Bible, but the first ways that we see it manifested is in the form of the serpent tempting Eve with the fruit. Again, Genesis chapter 3. Humanity tries to either go against God or tries to be independent from God. And if you think about it in the storybook context, sorry, I missed a line. Because of this inception in the Garden of Eden of the sin tempting Eve, is the setting of the first few chapters of the book or the Bible, if you're wondering. We see that it comes up every time humanity tries to go against God. So because of sin, every time humanity tries to go against God or try to be independent from God, is basically what sin is. It's just manifested in a different form. If you think about it in a storybook context, sin is the main antagonist of the whole entire story. The biggest antagonist against the biggest protagonist, which is God. Sin is what people, basically who sin is basically the thing that humanity wants to veer away from God. If that makes any sense to you. Hopefully it does. But to prevent you from getting more and more confused, let's move on to the next question. Where did sin come from? Well, there is no short answer to this, like the other questions. But the short answer that everyone knows is the devil, right? Or Satan, right? True. But then the bigger question is this: where did the devil get sin from? Well, the devil did not get sin like it's a collectible item, but rather he always had the free will to sin. Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 15. Just like how Adam and Eve has this free will to sin, the free will to do whatever they want, you and I also have the free will to do whatever we want, in theory. We have the free will to, love God or not love God. We have the free will to follow Him or not follow Him. So to answer this question, sin did not come from a specific source, but rather is something that all of us were capable of doing because we have the free will that God has given us. Okay, this is a very, very sensitive topic that I just want to do a little disclaimer. I have no idea whether what I just said was correct. I'm not a pastor, like I said. I'm not a scholar, but this is how I perceive it to be. So if it's wrong, which maybe it is, that by saying that all of us have the capability of sin because of free will, please let me know and link it to why it's wrong or what is so wrong about this concept. Please, I also want to know. But this is what and how I've understood it for the longest time, so I'm just going to say what I know. So when did sin arrive? This is the next question. Well, sin was not something that arrived per se, just like how sin was not something that people get. It's not a living thing, but it was first introduced through the rebellion of Satan. Yes, I know, you may say, hey, what about Genesis chapter 3? Isn't that the first time sin was introduced? Yes, but then in the Bible, there's this prequel, I'm using that term very loosely, like this before the Garden of Eden, what happened and sin in sin in Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 17. This is like the prequel of like the events that happened in Genesis chapter 1. There wasn't a time when sin is something that is manifested out of thin air, but rather it was something that every living being that God created, including humans and angels, had the capacity to do so. You can go read what Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 17 is all about, but basically what it is how Satan rebelled from God. He was known as Lucifer. He was an archangel of God, archangel that God created, and he thought that he could be independent from God. Sounds familiar? That's sin. So God decided to cast him out of heaven because of his pride, and then he became Satan, the person who opposes God. Very, very brief answer. This is what I understood from it all my life. And Ezekiel 28, it's an interesting chapter. You should go read it. It's like a poem of sorts, and it doesn't explicitly mention Satan. It mentions the king of Tyre, which is a historical person, but a lot of scholars believe that Ezekiel is basically documenting the fall of Satan. That's why he wrote it there. I linked a link to a commentary on this topic, on this verse or this chapter, I think. So you can go read it. It's quite interesting. So why is sin in humanity? The who, what, where, why, when, right? 5 W's. Well, this is actually a very good question. Why is sin in humanity? Because if God intended everything to be good in the first place, why did He want to create entities, you and me, or any being, with the ability to sin and ruin His grand plan of wanting everything for good? Because we've always heard, I've always said about how creation is everything that God wanted for good, and how sin is the thing that destroys that idea, and how sin came about is because of the free will that God has given humanity or any being that He created. Which, if you think about it, it's like He's putting in a do not destruct button. Like okay, I'm going on a tangent here, but in SpongeBob, there's this episode where I think Patrick put a do not destruct button on one of his creations, and then SpongeBob was like, why do you want to put a do not destruct button? And then Patrick said, so that I know that I won't hit it, because that will destroy whatever I had. It's like, what's the point, Isn't that, like, for lack of a better term, like a bit against your whole entire plan? Like, why would God give humans the free will, which in this case is the self-destruct button, to ruin His whole entire plan? And I mean, it's not really a big surprise, but the humans did push that do not destruct button and committed sin. Well, Well, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Well, this brings me to the idea of free will. You know, like God always intended for all his created beings, including humans, to have free will. Free will is a very important concept. He gave us the prerogative to make our own choices and to either follow him or not, to listen to him or not, to do this or not, that kind of thing, to obey him or not. They are not bound by a mastermind. They're not bound. We're not bound like puppets, on a puppet string, behind a screen or a controller, controlling every movement of ours. We're not controlled by anything. We have the own free will to follow him or not, to obey him or not, to do things or not. It's always a choice. But if God were to make created beings with no control, that are with him having no control, if God managed to create beings that he has full control of, then he has effectively created robots, on the other hand. So by putting that tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, it is not an oversight by him, but rather it's an act of love by him. Why is that so? Well, it's an act of love because only a God who loves his creation so much is able to let his creation have the free will to choose whether to walk out of his intended plans for his or whether to trust and obey him, even if it's painful or difficult. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents what God doesn't want humanity to fall into, doesn't want humanity to do. He doesn't want humanity to be so bound to the knowledge of good and evil like him. So that is the choice that he has given humans. He's given humans to either eat from the tree or not eat from the tree because of his free will. Because if he doesn't put a tree in the garden, the humans don't have any choice but to follow him. So by putting the tree in the garden, he has given humans the choice to either not follow him or to just ignore the tree and follow him. So this is his act of love, rather an act of instead of an act of oversight or a bit like putting a self-destruct button on your own robot. It's not because he didn't care or like he was don't really I cannot find a word, but yeah, basically it was not oversight. That's all I'm trying to say. Yeah, hopefully you're still with me. Hopefully you have not tuned away because this is quite a heavy topic. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. So by putting that tree of knowledge of good and evil, there is so many reasons and so many theories and understandings of it, but for my understanding of why he put it there is because of love. So in conclusion, sin is a very big and complex subject actually. To be very, very honest, I don't know whether I covered this topic well or not, because it's my first time actually doing a deep dive into this topic of sin. And as much as I'm telling you about this topic of sin, I'm also learning about it, which is quite counterintuitive. And I may have confused you even more, I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, just know that sin is this inciting incident into the story that causes the world that God intended for good, as we've seen from the previous topic of creation, to spiral out of control. This is the point in time which throws a wrench in the tires of God's plans, sin. But we see in the next part that God always has a way to redeem what was meant for evil. He has a way to change this unfortunate event. How? We'll see in the next part. So, I didn't write this part now, but to wrap up, because I think I've just managed to be a little bit confusing at the end. Sin is a very big subject, like what I say in the conclusion. But to understand the totality of sin is to understand God himself, or to understand everything in the universe, which is impossible. So it's a very big and tough topic to broach sometimes, or to understand, especially we have zero understanding about. And how can humans be considered evil from the start? How can people be considered bad from the start? and only need, with all these kind of things happening in the world, I believe humans are good or not. There's so many different things, so many different schools of thoughts in the world right now. But from the biblical point of view, humans have messed up. Humans made sin come into the world by proxy of Adam and Eve. And it's not what God wanted, but it's what it's not what he wanted. But he always have a plan to redeem the problems that humans have caused. Hopefully you have understood this very big topic. I have a bunch of links that you can read. Please do go read it. They explain it in a much better way than I did. I'm sorry, I cannot retake this whole entire video because I think at the end it's quite but yeah, but just know that, sin is bad, God is good. Okay, so welcome, you have come to the end of this whole entire episode, I guess, and we will see next week what the blood of Jesus is all about. And sounds weird, yes I know, but it's the more interesting and light-hearted topic of this whole entire story. Okay, so see you guys soon. Have a nice day ahead. Bye. Bye.